Wow. There's nothing else to say other than the Obama self-repeal of Obamacare continues. Next on Get Right with Lenny McAllister, starting right
now. Get Right with Lenny McAllister.
Attitude reflect leadership, Captain.
The way we help bring back America and we build the bridges and bring people together is by making sure we hold everybody accountable in a 360 fashion.
So let me close with this. Yes, there is a change that we can believe in, but it will never come from a politician or a government program.
We cannot find physical sanity here in the land of Lincoln, from Carbondale to Elgin, if we collectively continue to tolerate insanity found on the streets of South Chicago and East St. Louis.
We got to move away from the American Idol soundbite nature of politics and back to the American statesman of humble servant leadership that we used to see in politics.
It is time to roll out the era of the new, educated, engaged, and energized American citizens.
I go do the jail ministry. I speak to the kids in the streets. So I'm never going to lay down being conservative just as much as I'll never lay down being a proud African American.
I feel like a black republic. Money I got coming in. Can't turn my back on the hood. I got love for them.
The Obamacare self-repeal. It's kind of like the sun. You may see clouds, you may see rain, but if you just stick around long enough, if you just hold your horses, as they used to say I was growing up, you'll see it. It'll come. And yet another sign comes from President Obama. Here we go. Let's talk about it here. It's Get Right with Lenny McAllister. You know the drill. Twitter, LennyMcAllister. It's just my first and my last name smashed together, kind of like an ice cream sandwich, except it's Twitter. And Facebook, very simple, tinyurl.com/LennyPage. You got to put that PA in there for the Pennsylvania native, and I'm glad to be here in Pittsburgh. Had an opportunity, and we'll talk about this later on in the week, I suppose, even though the press conference with the president, which just ended not too long ago, that's going to dominate the conversation today. I wanted to talk about meeting Governor Corbett and just the good work that they're doing here with Big Brothers Big Sisters of Pittsburgh, and just the wonderful people that I'm meeting, for the first time, even though it's my native city, my hometown. But there's some good folks here, some good transplants here. It's been my first time in quite some time, so good to get reacclimated with what's going on here in the city of Pittsburgh. But I just cannot talk about that with this press conference that happened today and the ongoing self-repeal. And it is self-repeal. Anybody that says, and again, you can agree, disagree, you know where to find me. But anybody that says this is not self-repeal, they're fooling themselves. I really, and I'm going to say this before I dig into this. I really wanted to see the first African-American president succeed. Just is not going to happen. It has not happened. He successfully won re-election. But, for those that can't stand George W. Bush, the 43rd president of the United States, that guy got re-elected too. How did you think he did as a president? Exactly. I see you shaking your heads and saying, but, the Democrats that are out there. It's the same thing for Republicans. I don't really want to hear that President Obama got reelected. Because again, I say to you that if John Kerry, the John Kerry that we met in 2002 and 2003, that could actually articulate a point and could actually win a debate, showed up for any of the debates other than the third debate in 2004, he probably wins. But alas, he didn't. He didn't show up. He didn't campaign well. He reported for duty and then forgot to campaign. And after that, you ended up getting GW for another 4 years. And the Democrats and even many, many moderates and independents were not too happy about that in 2004. But it happened. He got 2 terms as president. And when history looks back on his presidential tenure, there are many, many people within the annals of history and historians and political scientists and the like that are not going to be too friendly towards the 43rd president of the United States, right or wrong. Just the same with the first African-American president. If you continue to look at this, the self-repeal, just the misgivings, the political misgivings. I won't even go into policy. I won't even go into leadership. I won't even go into any of those other things. I won't go into specifics. I will just sit here and tell you again, there's a common theme, which is this. He was a great campaigner, an okay politician, a very hyper-partisan guy that just cannot do this as well as he could or should. Again, and I say this, if you're going to self-repeal, why not get ahead of the curve? Why not get ahead of Ted Cruz? Why not get ahead of Rand Paul? Why not get ahead of the Republicans in the House of Representatives and basically rob them blind? Just rob them blind. Well, you know, what will it take for me to delay the individual mandate for Obamacare for a year? What would it take to delay the cancellations of thousands upon thousands upon thousands of insurance plans because they don't meet the new standards of the Affordable Care Act, which, by the way, it's very, very ironic that they're calling it affordable because many, many people like their plans because they thought those plans were affordable and it fit their lifestyle. But now that they get these new plans, it's anything but affordable for many, many, many people, which, by the way, you have to have healthy people in the pool so that the sick people can have their plans be affordable. So it's just, which is why I've always said Obamacare in its current form is a bad law. May have some good attributes to it. It's kind of like the Pittsburgh Steelers this year, 3-6 football team. Roethlisberger's playing fairly well at times. Antonio Brown doing rather well, leading the lead in receptions. He's doing quite well there too. They're a 3-6 football team. Aspects of the team playing very well. The team overall 3-6. It's the same with Obamacare. There are certain things that make sense. I think most people like. I don't think people would argue with Antonio Brown being a Pro Bowl wide receiver right now or a Pro Bowl kick returner right now because he's playing well. Still a 3-6 football team at this point in time. I know I'm getting to my Steelers, but I'm emphasizing my point, which is Obamacare in its current form is not good. It's not a good law in its current form, in its entirety, in its totality, which is how you have to judge this, which is why the Obama administration, rather than just going and dealing with it, delaying the whole thing, and then fixing it bit by bit as you lead up to the 2014 elections, and then win the 2014 elections if you're a Democrat, and that's what you want. Me, no. And then from there say, oh, well, you know, this is what we're going to do from here. Instead, this individual, the president, 44th president of the United States, who is not doing well as a politician in the White House, instead continues this self-repeal because it's the only way that he is willing to admit a colossal mistake, which is, and it's this big ball of things. Number one, that the way Obamacare was put together and passed and promoted and implemented was just bad for America. Asterisk in its current form. And I'm going to keep putting that out there because I don't want people to think that me or any other Republican we're against pre-existing conditions. We want people with pre-existing conditions to not get health insurance. That's far from the truth. Anybody that knows my personal story knows about my late mother and the medical conditions that she had. I took care of her. I was a power of attorney, so I know what it's like to go to the doctor's appointments and how one thing adds to another. And if you can't get health insurance, you're just screwed. And even when you have health insurance, because she had both Medicaid and Medicare, well, eventually got Medicare, but had Medicaid and had disability. We had to fight for that, despite the fact end-stage renal failure, and despite the fact of neuropathy, and despite the fact of heart disease, and all this other stuff. They still want you to be dirt poor, and they still, if they can, will get out of paying it because bottom line is that's insurance. That's kind of the game. Even when it's the government running it, they still kind of want to know who's going to pay for what, and there's a bureaucratic mess you got to go through. So Lord knows, I'm not wishing anybody to go through that mess. I've been there, done it, wasn't fun. Did that 10 years ago. Not fun, would not wish that on anybody. So that's not the point. The point is, however, in the big ball of messy yarn that has become the Obama way of doing things as president, and you look at that primarily through the prism of Obamacare, the way this law was written, patched together, I called it a Frankenstein law on PCNC. When I was on there on Pittsburgh Now on Wednesday morning, I called it a Frankenstein law, and that's exactly what it was. It was a placing together of patches and compromises, and, you know, some would call them bribes, others would call them, you know, negotiations. Some call them bribes, others call them negotiations. Not negotiations with Republicans, negotiations with other Democrats that in its initial form would not have voted for the law in the first place, which is what should tell you that this was done in a partisan way to please each other, and maybe it wasn't good when the majority of the country doesn't like the way the law is being put together and doesn't like what's in the law, and then the majority of people, including politicians, including those voting on the law, don't even understand what's in the law. The president knew all this 2010 when he signed it, 2011, 2012, and 2013 when the website was showing signs of being jacked up, when the bureaucracy was showing signs of crumbling underneath the weight, the obesity of this law. And that's what it is. This is a Frankenstein law that is just, you know, some good ideas, some bad ideas, some bureaucracy, some hopeful thinking. We'll try to make it look like a Republican law. And by the way, I'm tired of Van Jones constantly saying that this is a Republican law. It was put together by Democrats in Massachusetts that Mitt Romney jumped on board so he could have signature legislation to brag upon as he ran for the presidency in 2008. That does not make it a Republican law. It just doesn't. It's like saying, okay, Republicans run Mississippi, so they were responsible for Jim Crow. Because there's eventually a Republican governor at some point in time, even though these laws have been in place for 40 years, and maybe a Republican came in there in 1968, they're responsible for Jim Crow. Now, I don't know the electoral history of Mississippi, but I'm saying that basically at some point in time, I'm sure in 1972 or 68 or somewhere in there, the shift started going to the Republican Party, and there became a Republican governor in Mississippi, and there was still racism in Mississippi, even though the Democrats controlled Mississippi politics for 100 years. The Republican gets on board at the last minute as things are phasing out or things are completed or there's a shift or whatever, and you attribute it to the new guy that came in. It's the same exact way with Mitt Romney. Not, you know, racism versus healthcare. I'm not comparing the two. I'm comparing the political reality, so please stay focused. What I'm saying is stop calling Romneycare, Obamacare a Republican idea. I understand the study at the Heritage Foundation. They're a think tank. They are not elected officials. Their whole purpose is to throw ideas out there, throw theory out there, and then the politicians are supposed to tweak it and make it work for the diversity of a district, a state, or a nation. That's how it's supposed to work. Take the think tank, what's right, what's wrong, how does it fit, go from there. Then you have a president, and I'm going back to President Obama. You have a president, again, agree, disagree where I'm going with this. I'm sure you're thinking I'm slamming him way too much. But after you watch his press conference, and after you hear, if you like your plan, you can keep your plan. You like your doctor, you can keep your doctor, period. After hearing that for years, after the back and forth on NSA, the back and forth on just, there's so many different things. Benghazi, we still haven't had things answered on. Even the crowning moment, this is what should worry you. This is why I'm like saying to myself, I wish that this president were more successful. The two crowning achievements of President Obama's tenure. Think about this. The two crowning achievements of President Obama's tenure. Getting bin Laden. How did he do that? He had to basically ignore Pakistan, do what he wants, and that almost blew up, but thank God it didn't, in regards to making sure our soldiers came back home alive. But truth be told, even with that, go into a sovereign nation, ignore their leadership, do what we want to do. Supposed to be an ally. Now, if you want to add to this list, I said two. The other thing, obviously, is the signature legislation of Obamacare that's failing. Frankenstein is finally being tortured by the townspeople that have been chasing it around with pitchforks and torches for quite some time. Those would be the Republicans. And finally, everybody sees the monster. And everybody, love the monster. Well, it's finally showing that it's a monster and it's not working. And it's very, very slow. It's stiff. It can't react. And it's scaring the hell out of a lot of people. So yes, Obamacare is a Frankenstein. But even if you want to add to this list, there are other things you could sit there and say, okay, well, signature moments, you said getting bin Laden, something wrong with that. You said Obamacare, and I did. Those are two things. I mean, if you want to go to other things that you said, Lenny, I think you're wrong. There are other things that have been successful with this president. I'm going to ask you what. The unemployment rate has come down, and we have the lowest rate of participation in the labor force since the 1970s. Since the 1970s. That's not an economy. Well, think about what he had to deal with in the first place. Wall Street is just fine. Now, if you want to attribute that to President Obama, you got to attribute that to President Bush as well, because President Bush is the individual that was in the White House when TARP started. So it's either Bush gets some of this credit or he doesn't. You want Bush to have blame, but you don't want him to have credit. So I'm not even willing to give President Obama credit on this. This is the same president that gave bonuses to AIG and then wanted to tax it at a 100% clip. Oh, we made a mistake, so we'll just pass a law and tax them all at 100%. We could be here for a while. I genuinely wanted this president to be successful. I wanted him to be successful as a centrist. I didn't want him to be so partisan. I thought we may have had a chance to get that, but we didn't. And that's a shame. All I'm saying is at this point in time, the self-repeal has been so egregious that you have to ask yourself, what's the best thing for the nation? And I said Wednesday on PCNC that I thought this can be fixed. I'm wrong. I was wrong then. I don't think that this can be fixed in its current form. You are going to have to tweak it severely. You're going to have to shift it severely. The ideas of portability, insurance company portability. That was something that was mentioned in 2009 that we've never heard of again. Furthermore, I'm just going to put this out there since nobody else wants to talk about it, I guess. Maybe you do. Again, Twitter, Facebook, you know where to find me. When people have jobs and people can go back to work and people can shop around for their own insurance with money in their pocket, it's amazing what government doesn't need to do. Now, I'm not saying that we didn't need health care reform at all. I'm not saying that things such as pre-existing conditions being covered now were things that we didn't need to address. I'm not saying that the insurance companies were perfect in how they dealt with the American public. Generally speaking, that the rising cost of insurance was okay. And then, by the way, no one's addressing the rising cost of insurance either. The rising cost, the rising cost of medicine. No one's talking about the cost going up. We're just trying to make sure you can get insurance. Which, again, if we all remember how this debate started, this debate didn't just start talking about everybody needs insurance. This debate started talking about how come the medical industry basically hits 16% of our national economy, and that is way too much, especially when you compare it to other westernized nations. We need to make sure more people are covered, and we need to bend down the cost curve. That was the conversation in 2009. In 2013, it's trying to explain that that's not what I meant. I felt some people might lose it, but you'll get something better. You get this analogy of, we forced you to get rid of your old car and buy a new car, but you liked your old car because it was economical. And no, it doesn't go as fast, and it doesn't have a sunroof, and it doesn't have a CD player, And the air conditioning works sometimes, but it was yours and it was paid off, and it got you back to forth and work. Blah, blah, blah. Got me all blah, blah, blah. Got you back and forth to work. And now your car is repossessed. My bad, dude. I mean, it's, President Obama should have, done this and pushed this back himself for a year. But now that we're here, delay everything. You concede, surrender. If you're a Democrat, you're begging President Obama. I'll say this as we're wrapping up. If you're a Democrat and you're looking at President Obama, you have to be begging him. You have to be begging him to give you an opportunity to win a darn election this time next year. Because all you have done is proven the Republicans right. Whether you want to admit it or not, by basically misleading the American public for years, not a month or two, not just during campaign season for re-election, for years, when pushing for the law and when protecting the law. President Obama, you got to be, if you're a Democrat, you got to be begging, please give us an out. Be the bad guy. Fall on your sword. Take up your cross. Let us win. Heck, Obamacare only got passed through the Supreme Court because it was considered a tax. It's the only reason why it worked, because it was considered a tax. Otherwise, we're not even talking about this. I really, really wanted this to work out with the first African-American president. But I'm love him. I thank him for breaking the glass ceiling. But other than that, maybe he'll be a better politician over the next several years. And maybe, just maybe, the self-repeal will end and we'll get real reform. But the way this is looking right now, this is getting ugly. Ugly, ugly. Anywho, what do you think? What do you think? You know where to find me on Twitter, LENNYMCALLISTER. On Facebook, you know the deal. It's tinyurl.com/LENNYPAGE. It is a scandal night. For those of you like me that watch Scandal, get scandalous, have fun. I will catch up to you on another wonderful Friday. In the meanwhile, you have a great, great evening. Take care and God bless. Peace.